A good day to all of you, and I'm very honored to be allowed to share my reflections about deposit and EPR systems with you. My name is Joachim Quoden. I'm the Managing Director of the Extended Producer Responsibility Alliance, which is a club of 32 EPR systems, mainly from Europe, but also from Canada, Chile, Colombia, and since a few weeks from New Zealand. Myself, I'm working in the EPR business since more than 30 years, so I had the big pleasure to see a lot of EPR systems being founded, how they developed, how they perform. So I think I have a little understanding of what is happening in the various countries. The question about a deposit system, whether to implement it in a country or not, is somehow very often a kind of a religious debate. So either you believe in it or you don't believe in it. But this is, of course, I think, a quite difficult background to make as a legislator an informed decision. So I think, and I would try to provide facts to indicate when this is an opinion and to avoid any emotional relation for this topic. So as a legislator, you all, of course, have to ask yourself, why should we implement a deposit system on top of our existing EPR system in your country? Is it because the deposit system for one-way beverage container is the most environmental friendly solution? Or is it the cheapest solution for some industry? On the other side, perhaps an expensive solutions for our consumer? Do we just do it because Brussels would like us to do it? Or is it the best solution for our inhabitants? So I think that's the first question we have to ask ourselves. Why do we take a certain decision? Of course, this is not a free discussion, but we are in a certain context and framework. So as a member of the European Union, every member state is obliged to organize a separate collection inter alia for packaging, but not only for packaging. Every member state is obliged to implement extended producer responsibility for packaging as a mandatory tool to reach certain minimum recycling targets. And in the future, there will be probably even more obligations coming up. A certain minimum, a certain way how to implement reuse systems for beverage container, usually via a deposit as well. This seems to be quite clear, I would say, in the current discussions about the packaging and packaging waste regulation or directive at the moment. The question is how high the minimum targets will be for beverage containers. Of course, the Single-Use Plastics Directive obliges member states to have some minimum collection on top of the recycling targets for bottles, especially for PET bottles. There is a kind of pressure to introduce a deposit system, but mainly for those countries who have a bad performance in the collection and recycling of bottles. So 90% in the original proposal. It seems that the member states and the parliament are discussing now more around 80 to 85%. As far as I know and understand, Slovenia has a very good collection system and is collecting around 78% of the beverage containers. The challenges of your EPR system, as far as I understand, is more for the sorting and the recycling and for packaging put on the market. Is responsible to take care of the free riders, but from the collection part, which is done by your municipalities, as far as I know, this is one of the best all over Europe. So that's the context. And now, of course, it's interesting to see a deposit system for one way. What are the advantages? Usually, a DRS provides a quite high return rate. If you see the existing deposit systems, especially in Scandinavia, you see that they achieve 85 to 90% return rate in average. It is said that Germany has even a higher return rate, probably because of the very high deposit of 25 cents per bottle. As the German system is organized in a competitive way, there is no official data available. Of course, if packaging has money value, the people are probably better motivated to bring the containers back to the shop. And of course, if some people throw the containers into the nature, there are always some poor people who collect the bottles and bring them back to the shop to get the money. So that's said one of the advantages, that somehow we have enough poor people, unfortunately, who need the money and collect the waste on the streets. An advantage is that you can organize the deposit system nationwide, usually in exactly the same way, whereas the EPR systems, the collection model is usually decided by our municipalities, so that the concrete collection system might be different from district to district. It is said that if you just collect bottles, of course, there is less contamination with other materials, which is clear, because you just collect the bottles. On the other side, we see in Belgium that it is possible to sort out bottles in a fantastic quality that you can use for bottle-to-bottle recycling as well. The challenge is, of course, not everything has two sides. So there are some positive things with the deposit system, which are obvious, but there are, of course, some challenges as well. A new system costs money. I think this is clear for everyone, especially when you try to have a convenient automatic system by installing the so-called reverse vending machines. They cost a lot of money. They need a lot of space at the retail sector. So in Germany, we learned that the starting investment was around 700 million euros in 23, so 20 years ago, which means around 9 euros per inhabitant. But it's unfortunately not only the investment, it's of course the running costs as well. So someone has to pay the retailers for their efforts, someone has to pay the running costs of the machines, etc., etc. On the other side, you get some money from selling the material. Again, I only have figures from Germany. The retailers reported it during some meetings. It's again around 700 million euros per year. If you have a bad return rate, of course, you have a lot of unredeemed money in your pockets, but as higher the return rate is, as less unredeemed deposit you have in your pockets with which you can pay the running costs. So someone has to pay these investments and these running costs. So usually this is a part of the cost of the product. So very likely the bottles and the cans will become a little bit more expensive, which might add in total, of course, to your inflation rate in your country as well. Slovenia is surrounded by some neighbors. And so your deposit system might be attractive for your neighbors as well. That means they bring bottles into your country for which they did not pay a deposit, but get the deposit back in Slovenia. So you have to try to avoid this. And in Germany, for example, where we have 8 or 9 neighboring countries, they had even to invent not only a special barcode, but a special symbol with a special secret ink, which cannot be easily copied to avoid fraud that took place in the beginning of the system. So this has to be developed and has to be applied then to your bottles and cans that would be sold in Slovenia. Of course, it has effects to your existing EPR system as well, because up to now, you are collecting the bottles and the cans in your containers by the municipalities, sort them out and recycle them. As far as I heard, as I said, you have already a quite high return rate. So all these material will be lost in your EPR system. On the other side, it is quite difficult to reduce the collection frequency for your inhabitants. So you have less income from the material that is missing, but you cannot reduce your costs at the same time. So you become less efficient as a system at all. And of course, the other remaining packaging in the system have to pay more money per item than before. This is not a lot, but it adds again a few percentages to your local industry that they have to pay on top, even if they are not in the deposit system. As I said in the beginning, you as a country will have to introduce a reuse system for beverage containers as well. So somehow for the same kind of product, you will have to introduce might introduce on top of the DRS system for one way, a DRS system for reuse. So that's something we have to take into account as well. And we have to think what makes sense. Especially as reuse is said, this is the best environmental approach for all beverage containers, especially when the beverages are coming from your country. So what we should not do is to endanger this best solution. But what we saw in Norway, for example, they stopped their old reuse system in total because they said our one-way DRS is so good that we don't need the reuse system anymore. And in Germany, where the reason to introduce a one-way DRS was to stabilize or to stop the one-way trend, the reuse, especially for soft drinks and water, dropped dramatically. So that was a negative effect of one-way DRS to the reuse system. So this is something we have to take into account, whether this is a good thing or not, especially as we will have to introduce a minimum reuse system in our countries. Again, the question, how many systems a country would like to run for more or less the same kind of products? EPR for all beverage containers that are not within the DRS system, a DRS for one-way and a DRS for reuse. Two of them are mandatory, will be mandatory. One is where you do not need to implement it if your collection rate is high enough. Small shops will of course always have some trouble with a one-way DRS system because they cannot afford reverse vending machines. So they have to take back the beverage containers manually. They have to store them somewhere in their kiosk or in their small shop, and they have to see who is taking them back from their shops to sort them and to recycle them, and then they might get back their handling fee and their money. So this is something you will have to take into account. In Germany, it was said we do not have so many small shops compared to the large shops. In Spain, for example, and in Italy, the small shops are making most of the business, so they are extremely affected by a DRS system. That's why, especially in Italy, they probably will not implement the DRS. They have a good return rate, and they have too many small shops, which would be strongly affected by such a DRS system. And even with the DRS system, this is not enough to reach the minimum recycling targets. So you will still have to invest in your EPR system. You can see this in Finland. They have for many, many years a very good DRS system. But if you see the performance overall, they are struggling a lot to fulfill the minimum recycling targets for plastics. So it is not, if you introduce DRS, it is not a promise that you fulfill the targets as well. We have seen, especially in the beginning of a DRS system, where you seemed to get money for your bottles, that it is difficult to motivate the people to continue to sort the remaining packaging at home somehow for free. Of course, the people forget that they paid the money before to the retailer. From our psychology, you think you get something back if you do the right thing. So we have to increase the communication and the efforts of awareness for the remaining packaging to tell the people, please do something for free, because this is the good thing to do. This is something we have to take into account. The same, even if no bottle or no can is littered anymore. In the optimum case, which will of course never happen, we still have litter for all the other packaging, waste, and so on. So the problem of litter is not gone. And you can see this, that especially in all the Scandinavian countries, there's a big movement of keep our country clean, although they have a deposit system. So this problem will not go away, and we have to tackle it in any way. And if you apply the deposit system, you have to take a lot of decisions as well. Which DRS system would you like to apply? Because if you see the systems that are existing today, you will see that they are totally different in their scope, in their structure, and in their governance. There will be some help from the European Union in the future, because in the proposed PPWR, there are some minimum requirements for DRS system. So I think if you would continue the way to implement it, please take these minimum requirements into account, not to run into a problem in some months when then you find out that you will have to change immediately the legislation for the new minimum requirements. So perhaps to wait until the new law is approved could make it easier for you to avoid double work. At the end, very shortly, my personal conclusions. There is no silver bullet. There is no black and white decision. For some countries, for some situations, a DRS system is a very good solution. For other countries, I don't think it's a good solution. It is just doubling and tripling the effect. So that's why every country has to make its own evaluation. What is the best for the country and their inhabitants? Questions to ask: do we need one-way DRS to strongly increase the collection of the bottles? As you have a good collection in Slovenia, please think about it. Do you have such a strong litter problem for beverage containers that this might justify the additional efforts? I'm sorry, I have to come more often to wonderful Slovenia to understand your litter situation. And of course, do you have enough money in the country to pay 3 different systems? Thanks a lot. I wish you all the best for your discussion and conclusions, and I'm really sure that you will make the right decision at the end. Thank you very much.